I said it before, but Jess is, former exco of this group, former president of the CEC District 22.
Yep.
And she's going to tell us, actually, I'll put a link in the chat, but I think many of us were intrigued by an article in the city that sort of talked about what Place was doing with recent CEC elections. And we thought, well, who do we know who could talk about that?
I did find out so much information. So I am still currently, for one more month until June 30th, a member of CEC 22, Community Education Council for District 22, which covers parts of South Brooklyn from Kensington down to Garrettson Beach. I think we go as far as Homecross, parts of Gravesend. We kind of skip Ocean Parkway. And then, we go in Flatlands would be like our easternmost end of that part of our district. I was actually appointed to the current term in 2019 by Eric Adams, who was then borough president. So I am an Adams appointee. You're allowed to laugh at that. I find it really hilarious since I am not aligned with his values at all. So Place is an organization that's been around. I want to say they came around during the Carranza. Well, Carranza was chancellor. Their parent leaders for accelerated curriculum and education is what the acronym is. And they basically started around one issue, which was gifted and talented programming, and also the SHISHAT testing, which Carranza and de Blasio wanted to do away with or scale back, somehow make our specialized high schools more accessible to Black and brown students who typically did not get placed in those schools. So that was basically, they started to show up protesting anywhere Carranza was, especially if there were parent leaders there. And that was my first interaction with them, was actually in Bay Ridge. And I thought, I'm so glad there are people protesting for the things they believe in our education. Boy, was I naive. So now Place has evolved, besides spending 2019 and up until the pandemic protesting at various community education council meetings, both in my district and also in other districts that had more progressive leadership, like District 14. I want to say they went to meetings in District 17 as well, which would be Canarsie. 14 is Williamsburg. Williamsburg and Greenpoint, parts of Clinton Hill, I think, as well. So basically, they would just push back against anyone who wanted to see gifted and talented end, gifted and talented testing end. Anybody who wanted to see the SHIS admissions change. Anybody who just wanted more equity in education, and it got to be very, very dirty. Fast forward to the 21 elections for CEC leadership. The rules changed around CEC elections so that we were able to run in slates, but at that time we weren't allowed endorsements. So as a CEC member, I had to be very careful about who I told other folks to vote for and how I told them to vote. However, Place did publicize their endorsements in that election. They received no pushback from the DOE, whereas more progressive parent leaders were admonished for making endorsements. So just want to be very clear, the Department of Education does have interactions with Place, and it gives them allowances that they don't give to other parent leaders who are pushing for more equity in education, more diversity in our learning, in our curriculum, et cetera, et cetera. So they were able to get, they were actually very successful in that election across the city. I think they were able to get seats for about 60 of their candidates. However, their endorsement process is highly flawed. And this is also true in the election that just happened, which I think wrapped up earlier this month. So because they don't know, like they cannot possibly know every parent who is running, they cannot possibly vet everyone that they're endorsing. What they do is go through the candidate statements that are published on the DOE website and choose the ones that sound like they are most aligned with their values. However, in doing so, they make grave errors. For instance, in 2021, they chose in my district a woman named Florence Wang. Florence Wang is a woman of Irish American descent. She is she has one son, and she's a parent leader in South Brooklyn in Sheepshead Bay. I've worked with Florence for the last 2 years, and I can tell you that she is for diversity. She is, her positions are always to increase access for students with disabilities or students with learning disabilities, increase access for students with students learning English as a second language. So she would fall into the spectrum of like the most progressive parent leaders South Brooklyn has to offer. They also this year endorsed a woman in District 17 who has been the president of CEC 17 for 4 years now. Her name is Erica Kendall, but she was running under her married name. So they didn't realize who she is. She is one of the most outspoken parent leaders in New York City. If you Google her name, like she will come up in every publication in New York City. So they're not good at making endorsements. So you can't just look at the list and assume that who they're running or who they're endorsing is actually like a quote unquote bad actor. Speaking of bad actors, their leadership has got some really stellar characters. Vito Labella from Education District 20. Vito ran for state senate. Do you remember?
Against Bernardus, yes.
Yeah, against Gennardis. They also their co-president is Maud Marone, who is one of the scariest women ever. She's a public defender in Manhattan, and she uses that to come across as progressive. If you follow her Twitter or read anything she's ever been quoted in, it's obvious that she's aligned with right-wing values, especially anti-LGBTQ rights, especially as far as like visibility for those folks in our schools goes. So she's a piece of work. So that's who's running them. As far as who's backing plays, it's unclear. When they were protesting my meetings back in 2019, we had a meeting at PS 206, which is in Sheepshead Bay. Place bussed in about 150 people, almost exclusively from Queens. And I was told, and I don't remember the man's name. I don't remember the name of the organization he was with, but he's a major Trump supporter. One of the people that was there that had helped organize that protest at our school in 2019. They're almost certainly taking money from charters. They are pro-charter, which is really interesting for an organization that says that they are trying to elevate academic learning for public schools. But they are funded by a lot of, like, we don't know, but they are funded. A couple other things I just want to say. Recently in this election, they have been making their rounds on Fox News. And which is, there's some, the fact that Fox News is interviewing potential parent leaders or candidates for parent leadership in New York City sounds a little weird, but they're following the talking points of what you'd hear in a state like Florida. So, anything that's anti, well, here we call it CR, culturally responsive and sustainable education, but the whole CR, critical race theory, anti-LGBTQIA in education, they're parroting those talking points now. So it went from being don't take away gifted and talented to we don't want any diversity in our schools, right? We don't want those people represented in our schools or in our curriculum. One of their candidates was talking about Black math. I have no idea what Black math is, but my non-Black child is very, very good at it. So if that's what they're using now, I say great. I don't know, anything else? That's the rundown on place. I mean, it's just like, don't give them space. Don't retweet their tweets. Do not elevate them. There is an antidote to place, the organization that I would recommend people become a part of if you're in education, if you're interested in education equity, would be the Education Council Consortium, which used to include every district, leadership of every district, and have monthly meetings with the chancellor. But they are now a 501c3, an independent organization run by some of our most progressive leaders in New York City. And I'll throw their stuff up in the chat because they're awesome. Like they're the ones who brought me up. So yeah, definitely get involved with them. They have a listserv, which has lots of great like nitty gritty stuff. Lainey Himson from Class Size Matters is very active in that group, and another great organization to follow as well.
Thank you so much for that, Jess. That was wonderful. So I'm going to privilege myself by giving myself the first follow-up. Sort of a two-part question, which is, could you remind people or tell people who are unaware, what is it exactly that CECs do? What is in their power to do? What can they accomplish?
Yeah, I mean, people like
to say, to follow up on that, has Place accomplished anything other than making a name for themselves?
In District 2, which is like the Tribeca area of Manhattan, that's where they are most powerful. And that's where like most of the battles are being fought. I try not to look because it's gross and I have my own history that I have to like, manage my manage my capacity for BS. The thing that they're good at is getting the chancellor's ear. And that's what's scary because they are so closely aligned. Like the David Banks wants to undermine our public schools by elevating charter schools. We've seen that at the state level, in the budget. We've seen that as far as like district planning goes. We've seen that at every level. And it's frightening. And so Place, by basically being his lapdog and like echoing what he wants, they're getting more ground with him in the areas where they feel are important as well. So they have been effective in that route. As far as on the district levels, I haven't seen them. They aren't, I guess District 20, which would be from parts of Kensington all the way down to Bay Ridge. That's very conservative. 21, which is the central part of South Brooklyn, they're like, they're kind of lukewarm. And 22, we win for being the most progressive, but we're barely hanging on. It'll be really interesting to see what happens down here with our CEC election, because none of us are coming back pretty much. But as far as gaining ground, influencing the superintendents, passing resolutions, anything like that, no, I don't think they're effective. But they are dangerous. They are very dangerous. And so trying to counter their messaging is a huge challenge. And the biggest advantage, the biggest thing we can do is actually to gray rock them and give them as little space and as little acknowledgement and as little time as we possibly can. Like, do not, if a place member approaches you, do not engage with them. Like, don't, because they don't deserve it. Their messaging comes off, it's couched as inclusive, and it's not. Like, their approach is combatant to people who don't agree with them. I mean, it's like typical like right-wing playbook stuff. Like, it's like combat, dog whistling, like all of that. They do all of those things. And so, you know, it's just like, no space. So, you know, it can't be an us versus them kind of thing, you know, and, you know, it's really like, do we want to see books with people who are different than us in them? Do we want to make sure that our students who are struggling, our students with learning disabilities, are getting the supports they need? Do we want to make sure that our children that are coming out of pandemic learning, that are still experiencing chronic absenteeism, do we want to make sure those kids are okay, right? Are okay enough to actually go to school? They don't want that. They don't care. They're like, if you don't show up, that's your problem, right? But like, it's all our problems at the end of the day. So yes and no.
Thank you. Also, it's sort of funny that, you know, to bridge our two presenters, you know, we had Wei Chan's campaign manager running the district. You know, Vita Labella, you mentioned, is one of the vice presidents of place, or, you know, one of the place leadership. He is the Republican candidate in that race.
Oh, is he again?
Yeah. All right, Baruch, you've nicely had your hand up for a while. Go ahead. You need to unmute, Baruch. You've been muted.
I'm sorry, I would like to apologize for joining late because of some technical glitches which prevented me from getting the links. I consider myself fairly technically savvy, but there's a whole universe opened up to learn all of the ins and outs. But anyway, I caught the end and the gist of the last remarks, and I think they were excellently presented, Jess. I appreciate it. But I just want to put about my own component in that when I do the surfing online, because I like to do over a wide variety of topics, so I'm more superficial. When I burrow down, first thing that I look at are the headlines, and then I'll read the subhead and see if there's anything relevant. And I frequent a fair number of blog sites that I consider fairly balanced, like Reddit and Twitter, and I get a few other feeds from Substack, about 3 or 4 progressive feeds. I don't know if I posted the links in the Facebook page, but anyway, the gist that I'm getting now from Reddit is that the headlines from Florida mimic more or less on a smaller scale what's happening actually now in New York. And even though I present this as, it sounds like there's a conspiracy going on, but there happens to be a playbook that have been funded by the right-wing supporters, okay, or the conservative think tanks, including the Manhattan Institute in Manhattan. That's my general feeling. David Banks has written a number of articles on the Manhattan Institute blog site. And there are other instances of where they mention names, and when I chase the links down into the social media pages, they show that these people are funded or on the websites of right-wing colleges or universities. So I'm not trying to say that it's evil, but the Democrats are not as unified around the philosophy or as backed as strongly as the Republicans and the conservatives and the QAnon alt-right wingers. We need to have a more unified approach. And the diffuse approach with the mainstream or the Big Ten doesn't really work. We can't now be reactive. We have to be proactive and adopt the techniques and the scorched earth policy that the right wingers are using. Unfortunately, there are too few of us right now to do it. But I would like, you know, the people, if everybody would stop discussing up in the air and come down to the actual tactics that work on the ground, which are short quips or slogans that demonize or marginalize the extreme views, that might ring a little bit better with the crowd that are FOMO right now. Everybody is brain fucked, pardon the expression in the French. Well, no, that comes from, I think, a Germanic word. It's a derivative. But anyway, the indoctrination that people are getting from the media and the multiplicity of ads and other talk sites that are piling on all the time is just overloading people's analytical abilities. Okay, so this is what we have to deal with. And the only way to get into it is with a short blurb. And this is something we have to work on. Unfortunately, there is somebody by the name of Bitacor. I think I once referred to her, or I referenced her in a couple of blogs. But the thing is, she's really way out with her use of derogatory and plain curse words, which I feel are inappropriate. We have to appeal to people and not to go greatly and offend their sensibilities. So that's all I want to lay out. The tactics have to be hard, short, and we could have to stop discussing all the other possibilities and concentrate on just, you know, getting people to pay attention to the evils that are happening in the city, because Adams is right now following the same playbook. Okay, he's already gone to a few Republican fundraisers, and he meets almost nightly with all of the crowd that supply him with his next move. And we don't know where all of his directions are coming from. Okay, that's it. I'm pretty sure that not everybody is going to buy into what I say, because it will offend their own ways of thinking. But the point is, we're in a polite society, and it's really difficult in daily life. But we have to repel with what the enemy is setting the rules now. We're not the enemy. The enemy is there, but we may be just stumbling on our own feet. I'm sorry for the diatribe, but I needed to get it out, and the point very clear.
All right. Well, thank you, Baruch. We do appreciate hearing your perspective. And you can see that there are ties between a local organization like Place and the more national organizations that are pushing these conservative right-wing policies. There's a group that calls itself the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism that's basically anti-diversity, I'm blanking again on the term that just used, responsive and education, culturally responsive education. So despite its name, sort of Orwellian, actually against those things. And Maud Marone, big in Place, also was one of the co-founders of the New York chapter of that group. So there certainly is a connection that's happening around the country. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments for Jess, or generally about education? All right. Well, thank you so much for coming back, Jess, to talk with us. We always appreciate seeing you here.
Of course. I wish I could come more often. The Thursday meetings are hard for me. I'll just say that.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. We don't know what day our next EMJC meeting is, but we'd love it if you could attend that. All right.